We have success. All 4 legs.
Look at the size of the chunk of meat.
He was a captain in the British Army. He is an explorer as renowned as Bear Grylls. He is the first man in history to trek the entire length of the Amazon River on foot. This time, he is embarking on an even greater adventure, surviving alone for 60 days on a tropical desert island. That's right, he is the world's top survival expert, Ed Stafford. For this challenge, Stafford again brought no tools. The survival duration has been extended from the original 10 days to 60 days, a full 2 months. In preparation, Stafford underwent rigorous medical examinations. Doctors confirmed all his physical indicators were normal. He then traveled worldwide to enhance his survival skills. While physical fitness is crucial, Stafford understands mental resilience is the key to surviving on a desert island. To strengthen his psychological endurance, he lived with indigenous tribes for several months. Soon, Stafford's challenge began. With a mosaic filter, Stafford made his grand entrance, heading straight for the island. From this moment, all hardships would be his to bear alone. To survive here, he must fulfill 4 essential needs: ample water, food, fire, and shelter. Fresh water became the immediate priority. Though Stafford can endure hunger better than most, human tolerance for thirst has universal limits. 3 days without water would spell disaster. Surveying his surroundings, Stafford identified coconuts as the most accessible water source, with coconut trees lining the coast. Pickily, he chose green coconuts over fallen mature ones. After cracking one open, he gulped down the coconut water. The delicious fluid satisfied his thirst completely, though consuming all coconuts on day 1 risked his 60-day survival. Within hours, loneliness set in, perhaps missing his family. Needing shelter before nightfall, he soon found a cave, claiming his studio apartment. To improve comfort, he gathered soft grass for bedding. His first night passed peacefully. At dawn, chilly air made Stafford realize he'd brought no clothing. However, with daytime temperatures reaching 32 degrees Celsius, he shrugged off his nakedness. Collecting sea snails for breakfast, he smashed them with rocks. The first stone failed, but the second worked. Each snail provided mere calories. He needed 3,000 daily. These snacks were just appetizers. Searching for fresh water, Stafford found rainwater pooled in rock crevices, natural spring water from mountain runoff. He drank directly despite impurities, later fashioning tree bark into a filter. Playfully, he crafted a grass skirt and twirled before the camera to showcase it, discovering washed-up plastic bottles, one with a reusable straw, and flip-flops. He gathered these useful items. His main supplies were memory cards and batteries. Back at his cave, he lined the floor with palm leaves and caught a small gecko. Attempting humane killing with a stone, he reluctantly chewed the lizard, murmuring, "Nice." Having no tools was the biggest challenge for survival on this island, so Stafford started making his own equipment. He slowly chopped trees with hard stones. To get rich, first chop wood. Turns out the game Minecraft wasn't lying to me after all. His first tool was a long wooden stick, which allowed him to gather more coconuts. Since he couldn't find any food here, he had to frantically collect sea snails by the shore to eat. Soon the day passed, and night came again. Time for Stafford to reflect on life. He set himself a small goal: grit his teeth and endure for half a month here. When he woke up the next day, Stafford realized the importance of water, so he collected 2 huge scallop shells to collect rainwater. Finding some rope by the shore, he made a siphon to channel spring water into bottles. Now Stafford had 2 water collection systems. For these 2 days, Stafford had been active along the coast. Now he needed to explore inland. Soon he made an unexpected discovery. 2 or 3 wild goats appeared in the nearby jungle. Stafford unconsciously analyzed the nutritional content of goat meat in the periodic table. He immediately decided he must catch one to eat. But without tools, Stafford had to temporarily abandon this idea. He then discovered large amounts of charcoal on the ground. He broke small charcoal pieces, ground them into powder, and stuffed it directly into his mouth. After brushing, Stafford went to the island summit. Surrounded by sea on all sides, finding food wasn't easy at all. Time came to the 5th day. Stafford checked his new water storage system. Clearly, the siphon method really worked. The plastic bottles were already full of spring water. By now, Stafford had solved his food, shelter, and water problems. Next came living. Stafford gathered branches to make a fire drill. Without tools, he had to use the most primitive method to cut the sticks. As he worked, he reflected on his many days on the island. He laughed until he almost cried. Stafford tilted his head back at a 45-degree angle, trying not to let tears fall. But what's some hardship for a real man? Calming himself, he continued working. He picked up the finished fire drill to start a fire. But this primitive method wasn't so simple. The rope broke after just a few tries. So Stafford switched to another method, rubbing the stick directly with his hands. Unfortunately, after several hours, the stick only produced a tiny wisp of smoke. It seemed fire wouldn't happen today. Time came to the 6th day. Stafford woke up wanting to drink some water, but found the water wasn't being channeled into the bottles. Now water became Stafford's headache again. You ate all the coconuts at once? Now you know you were wrong? Stafford had to look for coconuts growing higher up to replenish fluids. He spent 4 hours chopping a long pole. Fortunately, he managed to knock down some coconuts. The sweet coconut water revived Stafford, though unfortunately he still didn't feel full, probably because there weren't as many coconuts left. Then he upgraded his little grass skirt, making it look much better. Since he couldn't find suitable wood for fire making and his homemade fire drill kept breaking, Stafford tried many methods but still failed in the end. On day 7, Stafford found a longer stick to reach higher coconuts. Having not consumed enough protein for several days, Stafford now felt completely weak. Unfortunately, the coconuts were too high. After several attempts, he couldn't knock down a single one. Despairing, Stafford occasionally let out legendary roars like an angry dragon. Now Stafford's body was extremely weak. As soon as he returned to the cave entrance, he started vomiting violently. So Stafford's dinner became a dose of antibiotics. Day 9 arrived. Stafford found a t-shirt in the jungle. On his way back, he discovered goat footprints. Later, he realized it was these damn goats that had knocked over his spring water collection. This was undoubtedly adding insult to injury for Stafford. Stafford picked up an old coconut he had initially discarded to drink from, only to find it completely empty. Now lying in his cave, Stafford felt extremely unwell. He had no choice but to take antibiotics again to relieve his discomfort. Day 11 finally brought good news from above. It rained. Stafford's seashell containers filled with water. He collected 2 liters of rainwater in bottles and gulped it down thirstily. The hydrated Stafford regained his energy and burst into gleeful laughter. Stafford discovered taro plants on the island. Rich in carbohydrates, he managed to dig up 4 taros. However, without fire, raw taro couldn't be eaten. With food secured, Stafford's intelligence suddenly peaked. He sliced the taros and sun-dried them to make taro chips. After several hours, Stafford finally got to eat his taro chips. Chewing a few bites, he found them refreshing and edible, though somewhat salty. After eating, Stafford crafted a fish trap from a plastic container. He cut open the bottle's mouth, inverted the bottom into it, and placed it in a tidal pool. Fish could enter but not escape. Hours later, Stafford's trap yielded bountiful results, 8 small fish in total. To Stafford, this meant precious protein. He immediately started chewing the raw fish, while proudly showing off his catch to the camera. With protein replenished, Stafford resumed his main quest, making fire. This remained his nightmare, as all previous attempts failed due to unsuitable wood materials. But on day 13, he developed a new bow drill with different wood. Persistence finally paid off. Sparks appeared at last. He carefully placed the sparks in tinder and gently blew on them. Anyone seeing this ritual would know Stafford was about to succeed. Soon, a small fire emerged. Stafford's excitement overflowed as he shouted joyfully at the sky. Don't underestimate this small fire. That marked Stafford's evolution from primitive man to a new level of civilization. With fire secured, Stafford immediately brewed tea. No one knew when he'd found tea leaves. Contentedly, he toasted to the camera with his cup, chuckling gleefully. Next, he roasted island coconuts over fire. They tasted like burnt cookies. Despite having fire, Stafford remained vigilant. With rainy season approaching, he needed to relocate his fire to safety before the rains came. Clearly unsatisfied with his small cave, Stafford needed to build proper shelter. Day 15 arrived. Stafford cooked himself breakfast, 4 large crabs, This was probably the most delicious meal he'd had since arriving. After breakfast, Stafford began constructing his new shelter. He found a relatively elevated spot to build his hut. However, after more than 10 days without sufficient protein, Stafford was noticeably weak. What seemed like simple work left him utterly exhausted. Without a proper axe, Stafford had to use stones to chop trees. By day 17, Stafford had only just finished the basic framework of his house. With just his bare hands and a large seashell as his only tool, he kept cutting trees in the forest. What would take 2 hours with a proper knife took Stafford days. He also needed to strip bark for binding about 400 meters worth. After cutting down 3 trees, Stafford was dizzy with exhaustion. Working in such high temperatures, he lost about a liter of water every half hour. Forced to retreat to his cave for tea, Stafford's mood was visibly low. He was starving. His lunch consisted only of coconuts and a few sea snails. Since arriving on the island, he had eaten the same things almost every day. Clearly, it was time for a change. After applying sunscreen, Stafford headed to the shore. He found a toothbrush and an American football, which he used as a pillow. Its genuine leather made it surprisingly comfortable. Using charcoal powder and the toothbrush, Stafford cleaned his teeth. Then, he caught a crab and a small eel by the shore. He also found a slimy creature in the rocks, something resembling a sea cucumber, but too disgusting to consider. Stafford ate the eel with relish. Though a bit sticky, it tasted decent. As for the sea cucumber-like thing, he tossed it into the fire. Unexpectedly, it exploded, exposing its flesh inside. The taste was bizarre, somewhat like chocolate. The next morning, Stafford discovered it had rained heavily overnight. He immediately collected rainwater. With 9 bottles of fresh water now stored, he had enough for 2 days. But continuous rain was coming, and Stafford grew worried. The rainy season was truly approaching. His cave was cold and damp, and his new shelter wasn't ready yet. He had to hurry. Gathering palm leaves, Stafford began the tedious process of weaving them into roofing. By day 21, Stafford was stuck in a monotonous routine, cutting leaves, weaving, and binding. It was dull but necessary. What should have taken 2 hours with proper tools took him 10 days. He still hadn't managed to fell a particular tree. Exhausted and low on energy, Stafford had little food and barely enough water. On day 22, dehydration struck again. He had to gather more coconuts for hydration. Later, he searched the jungle for taro, but the ground was too hard. His weakened state made digging impossible. In desperation, Stafford plucked a random leaf and chewed on it. At first, it tasted fine, but then disaster struck. His tongue began itching violently. Damn it, Stafford had been poisoned. He quickly rinsed his mouth with seawater, easing the burning sensation. Then, he returned to building his shelter. After 9 days of work, the hut was only half finished still, lacking a roof. Stafford would need much more time, but he had no energy left. Even a small eel bullied him, biting him multiple times. Returning to his shelter, Stafford found that those damn goats had left droppings everywhere, as if they now owned the place. But in his weakened state, catching one was impossible. Staring at the goats, Stafford lingered, practically drooling. He made a vow on the spot. I must catch one and taste it. Day 24 arrived. Stafford moved dry firewood into his new shelter, but the space was too small to withstand heavy wind and rain. Exhausted and severely dehydrated, he felt like all his previous efforts had been meaningless. Now, loneliness overwhelmed him. He desperately wished for someone to talk to. By day 27, digging up 8 taros and catching another hermit crab, things seemed to be improving slightly, and his mood lifted. Finally, after over 10 days of effort, he managed to fell that stubborn tree. Looking at his completed shelter, Stafford hummed a cheerful tune to himself. He quickly packed his belongings and moved into his new home. After settling in, Stafford brewed himself a satisfied cup of tea. A surge of energy filled him, and he chuckled gleefully. Unknowingly, Stafford had already spent half his time on the island. By day 30, fresh water remained his biggest challenge. Like the cartoon character Grey Wolf, he dreamed of catching a goat every day, yet still hadn't succeeded. On day 33, Stafford realized he needed proper weapons to hunt goats. He decided to craft a bow and arrow. Finding a flexible wooden stick, he fashioned his first prototype. But when tested, the pathetic bow shot arrows shorter than a child could throw a rock. Clearly, this wouldn't work against goats. Day 37, Brought good fortune Stafford collected 2 large cans of sea snails. But bad news followed. His trusted cooking pot had sprung a leak, rendering it useless. The setback frustrated him. Just as life seemed to improve, he'd taken 3 steps back. Undeterred, he improvised with a large seashell for cooking, though it proved far less efficient, requiring much longer to cook food thoroughly. On day 41, the mystery of Stafford's health issues was finally solved. His stomach had swollen abnormally, likely from undigested charcoal he'd consumed earlier. His condition worsened rapidly. That night, high fever and severe stomach cramps struck, the pain exceeding normal endurance limits. Helpless, Stafford activated his satellite emergency beacon. A medical team arrived within 40 minutes, but merely checked his temperature and blood pressure, prescribed antibiotics, and left. By day 42, Stafford's pain had eased. Walking along the beach, he found an oil drum likely left by the medics. Using stones as tools, he painstakingly cut the drum open, clearly envisioning it as his future goat meat cooker. Boiling goat meat with just an iron rod would take forever. He also sharpened a scrap of metal into a blade. Had this tool appeared earlier, he wouldn't have spent days chopping a single tree. Binding the blade tightly to a wooden handle, he created a sharp axe. Without hesitation, Stafford tested it on taros. The tool worked perfectly. Rich in carbohydrates, these taros became his staple. Stafford even planted some nearby, ensuring food variety when tired of crabs and snails. Early on day 43, Stafford spotted a massive coconut crab nearby, so large that at first glance, he mistook it for some island spider. Without hesitation, he roasted the crab over fire and devoured its meat.
Look at the size of the chunk of meat.
Instantly, he felt his energy levels surge. After the feast, Stafford continued refining his bow. But when he actually tried hunting, he realized these goats weren't easy. Prey they effortlessly dodged his arrows. Clearly, catching one with this weapon would be tough. On day 44, Stafford focused on building a rainwater collection system for his roof. He heated metal sheets, cut rubber tubing, and installed them along the shelter's edges. Soon after, rain arrived, and his system worked perfectly. Freshwater worries were finally solved. Now adapting well to island life, Stafford headed to the beach to gather sea snails. Suddenly, eerie bleating echoed in the distance. Approaching cautiously, he came face to face with the second main character of his survival story, a battle-hardened-looking goat, appearing in the most unexpected way. Stafford hurled a stone, instantly killing the goat.
Yes! Yes!
Hauling it back to camp, he finally put his homemade knife to use. For 7 exhausting hours, he butchered the meat. To prevent spoilage, he first boiled the offal into soup, bursting into his signature gleeful laughter. The next day, he preserved the remaining meat by digging a pit, heating stones inside, layering them with palm leaves and mutton, then covering it with soil to slow cook with residual heat. 3 hours later, Stafford lifted a massive roasted leggies, triumphant giggles confirming the method's success. The aroma was irresistible. By day 47, Stafford had devoured nearly all the mutton, so delicious he'd wake up hungry just to nibble leftovers. Spoilage concerns proved unnecessary. After cleaning and sun-drying the hide, he fashioned himself a luxurious goatskin coat. Noticing maggots infesting the leftover carcass, Stafford, unfazed by the disgust, collected them in a jar and placed it in his seawater fish trap. After high tide, the bait worked. He caught a large fish and cooked hearty broth. Life seemed comfortable. On day 50, ambitious for exploration, Stafford built a bamboo raft using dried stalks and bark ropes, but his greatest fear remained sharks. Day 51's voyage attempt failed miserably. Anxious and sleepless, Stafford pushed the raft into rough seas only to find his makeshift paddles useless against the currents. Forced to abandon the expedition, he retreated ashore. By day 57, Stafford's lifestyle had upgraded significantly. He exercised regularly and slept on a cozy goatskin mattress far superior to the hard ground. Spotting an unripe mango tree, he couldn't resist sampling the fruit. The impulsive bite came at a cost. This front tooth snapped clean off. Day 60 arrived, finally, the day for Stafford to go home. He was extremely excited, dreaming only of eating a proper meal again. As he reached the shore, The sound of his pickup plane echoed in the distance. Stafford was about to leave this small island. At last, this had been the most unforgettable challenge of his life. With the plane fading into the distance, Stafford's 60-day wilderness survival journey came to an end.